Hello, everyone. Again, I am just so delighted to be in conversation with folks I see as leaders in the decarbonization conversation around campus. And of course, you all are as well. We brought this panel together, and again, thank you so much to Maggie again for pulling together all of this. But we wanted to bring together this diverse panel to focus on the opportunities for decarbonization research here at the University of Michigan. The kind of guiding questions for the panel are, one, in what ways do we excel? Where are we crushing it as a university enterprise? Where can we do better? And where are we headed? What are our aspirations as a community? And so I just want to quickly introduce folks who probably don't need much of an introduction. We have Todd Allen, who is the chair of nuclear engineering and radiological sciences. He is also the director of the Fastest Path to Zero and Michigan Memorial Phoenix Project. He's the co-director as well of Michigan Hydrogen, or MI Hydrogen, or My Hydrogen. I knew there was something there. And co-organizer of Clean Energy Conversations that the Graham Institute co-hosts. So thank you so much, Todd, for being here. Also, at the other end of our panel here, we have Arthur Skip Lupia, who's the interim vice president for research and innovation in the Office of the Vice President for Research. And prior to that role, he said, you know what, I think I have something I could do with this bold challenges thing you all are doing here at the university. So he took that over in 2022. And many of you may recall that program was designed to facilitate cross-campus and cross-school collaboration, increase public impact, and increase our competitiveness for large grants on essential challenges. So thank you so much, Skip, for being here. To my immediate right, we have Shelie Miller, who is the co-director of the Center for Sustainable Systems at SEAS, so the School for Environment and Sustainability. She has a ton of experience in the policy space, excited to hear her perspective as she works at the Food, Energy, Water Nexus. She works on plastics, food waste, and the urban-rural kind of interface. So Shelie, Dr. Miller, thank you so much for being here. And then again to my left, we have Jonathan Overpeck, who is affectionately known as Peck, or just commonly known as Peck. I don't know if it's affectionate or not. Not sure. We're all friends here.
Think of me as your puppy.
Okay, whatever we need to do. Yes, so Peck is the Samuel A. Graham Dean in the School for Environment and Sustainability, such a thought leader on sustainability here at the University of Michigan. He's been the dean at SEAS since 2017, and he was recently elected to the National Academy of Sciences this year. So thank you so much, Peck, for being here. And then last but not least, we have Kathy Velikov, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Creative Practice at the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. So currently, she's co-leading an interdisciplinary faculty exploration of the Living Learning Lab possibilities here at the University of Michigan. She was involved and has been involved in the launch of the Climate Futures Initiative, which will launch next month. I'm really excited about that. And we're just delighted to have her perspective on urban design, material ecologies, systems-based, and computational design methods at this table. So welcome to all of the panelists. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to try to keep this moving, and we do, at the end, have an opportunity for your questions to surface. So we have a slide that should go up that will, in theory, provide you with a number that you can plug into slido.com. So just keep your eyes on that, and then if you see it, you can always go to Slido and put in your question. So that should be coming, but know that there will be an opportunity for you to engage. So I want to start at the very end with Skip. The question on the floor for all of our panelists is, what is one important way that Michigan has that Michigan has done work in the decarbonization and that work has evolved over the last decade? So what is one way in which Michigan's work on decarbonization has evolved over the last 10 years.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you for having me on the panel. I'd say, if I had to put it in one word, it's intentionality. And the question is intentionality about what? So it's intentionality about collaboration, like broadening collaboration across campus with external partners. There's intentionality about integrity, about the quality of the work, about the quality of the interactions that we have with people, particularly with communities, right? Trying to do work that increases wisdom and capacity from the perspective of the people that we're engaging with. Sort of, starting by doing 100% listening and then building from there. And then intentionality about service, right? The discovery part is great, the interaction is great, but ultimately we're a public university, right? And watching how things have evolved, watching how SEAS has evolved and how the Graham Institute is involved. And we've stood up, a whole bunch of new things, My Hydrogen, right? You see those three types of intentionality in all of that. So that's what I see. I mean, it was great 10 years ago, but now I think it's more focused, it's more rigorous, and as a result, the impact that we do have on society and the untapped potential is really significant.
Great. Let's move down to Peck in terms of the evolution of the decarbonization conversation here and the work that we're doing at the university. How has it evolved?
Well, you wanted one thing, but I'm going to give you three.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to do it quickly. The first is, I think everyone in the room knows that the University of Michigan is known for its traditional scholarship, doing fantastic research, writing papers that get widely read, cited, is something we're all very proud that we know how to do. But I think what we're seeing is a transition now where that remains strong, but at the same time, we have even bigger impact by partnering in society and really moving the needle in society. So if we can do these two things, the University of Michigan can have much bigger impact, and that's important. Second, and Shelie might say more, but I've been so impressed with the systems thinking at this university. It's not just in SEAS, it's across this campus, but really understanding that if we're going to solve the energy transition, we're going to solve food, we're going to solve water, we're going to solve justice. There are all these other things that we have to solve simultaneously. So we don't end up with solving one problem and causing three more, like we've always done in the past when we try to do big things as humans. And lastly, I think this is a mega trend. All universities, presidents probably, and certainly a lot of us in the rank and file, are starting to realize that in America, universities are under assault by a large party in our country, and that we need to do more to serve society if we really want to continue to thrive. And I think that's something the University of Michigan is really poised to do. And working together, not just across campus, but with partners off campus, to create that more sustainable and just world without climate change is one way we can have unparalleled impact and unparalleled service to society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think Shelie, you got the mic. So let's go to you. I mean, Peck is talking about kind of the principles that drive our work. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, again, from your perspective, how has the conversation shifted here at the university?
For sure, and I think one of the big things is a change toward from technology to people, really. And so I think that really is a shift that we've seen in maybe the last 10 years or so, where it used to be that a lot of the research was focused on developing technology, analyzing the technology, and now there is much greater orientation to a people focus and a community focus and building trust and understanding how people and the technology have to work together. And so I think it has really broadened the conversation across the university. So I certainly don't know everybody in the audience, but I was counting and I counted 7 unique schools and colleges represented. I'm sure Graham has better numbers on that. And I think that actually speaks both to who is involved in the research, but also the way in which we collaborate as a community, and that it is easy to collaborate with one another, even though we are from different schools and colleges and have a shared purpose. And I think, I think that flatness has always been a piece of Michigan, but I think particularly in decarbonization and sustainability efforts, we're really seeing, at least willingness, if not always, actuality of being able to work together and work across these schools and colleges on sort of holistic thinking on these systems.
And Kathy, thank you so much, Shelie, for that response. Kathy, you're leading an interdisciplinary discussion, or a part of an interdisciplinary discussion across campus. I wonder if you could pull on the thread that Shelie has surfaced regarding that interdisciplinary collaboration, or maybe pick up on something else that has already been shared.
Sure. Yeah. I think I've been, here for about 15 years. So what I've seen is the discussion around sustainability and decarbonization go from being a kind of interest of some, a very passionate interest of some, to becoming something that is embraced and championed, and we've seen incredible leadership from the top levels of the university, and I think Jennifer really introduced that quite well with all of the commitments, the new positions, the Vision 2034, and so I think that is one of the most powerful contexts that the university from the kind of leadership level has done to make a real commitment to transformation. And what I also have know that is that there's a realization that decarbonization is not just a goal. It's not a place. It's a process, and it's also a relational practice. And so, putting in the frameworks to start to change, to start to rethink about how to reconfigure almost everything that we do, all our practices, all our processes, our values, and all of our systems, I think has been something that Michigan has really started to put into place. Your position is part of that. And then I have also been, part of one of the aspects of that vision, if we start to get into sort of specifics, which was an aspect of the PCCN and is now part of Vision 2034, which is campus as a living lab, and to really invest in the place and the asset of our own campus is an opportunity not only to decarbonize, but to also scale research rapidly, to build, to prototype, and to really try to create now what we know we're going to need in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years, and to really and to do that with a focus on people. And I think the commitment also to justice and equity. I'm really really proud of the way that the university has championed that and made that part of all of the conversations. So.
Love it. Well, I'm going to come back to you two to talk about students and ecosystem in just a moment. But Todd, share with us kind of from your perspective how things have shifted on campus.
Yeah, sure. So let me finish up. The fun thing about being fifth is they said all the good stuff, and I have to change my answer as I'm going. But I'll just say, I came to the University of Michigan 6 years ago. I was primarily motivated because I felt like I wanted to change my primary field, trained as a nuclear engineer, because we only thought about technology. And we thought that technology alone would change the way people deployed energy. I didn't think it was right. And I got attracted to come here because there were lots of people who wanted to have these discussions around interdisciplinary things. The university had the resources that would allow me to make the changes I thought, and it's been great. Like, we have been able to hire faculty that don't look like traditional nuclear engineers, that worry about the societal or the policy aspects of this. And I'll finish by saying, within the College of Engineering, in the 5 years I've been here, we now say that our mission is people first engineering, right? Be good engineers, that's your primary thing. But think about the interdisciplinary nature of what you do, and think about the ethical consequences to the people who have to live with your products, right? So it's like we sort of live it here and try to push it forward, and we'll probably talk a little bit later about where we're not quite there yet, but I just think the direction is right, and I love 2034 because I think it'll help focus us even better.
Yeah. I love that. It's not 50 years from now, it's 10, right? So it's right around the corner. I want to stick with you, Todd, and raise a question for the panel that I'm hoping people don't feel too put off guard by. But so I understand that, my role in particular is a product of a lot of conversations that have happened around campus from the students and faculty and staff. But I'm wondering if you all could characterize kind of how far the research enterprise lags or is ahead of conversations among students regarding sustainability and climate, and conversations that are happening in the community and the state, regarding sustainability and climate. So if you're thinking about like horses on a track, where do those three kind of components and constituents fit? I've always found that students push, right, more. But just wondering if you could characterize that race and where we are as a research enterprise, if we want to kind of focus on that for now in that conversation. Todd?
Yeah, so I agree with the thought that students push, right? I mean, I've had to change my attitude that if I don't get smart about thinking about engineering in terms of people, technology, policy, the students will not want to come work with me, right?
Yeah.
I will not even, just practical, I will not be a good recruiter, right, if I can't talk to their aspirations, and I think that's important. I think that in some ways, the state we're in, the country that we're in, it keeps advancing its thinking about this. I think in the last 4 years, we've become much more thoughtful about people, and I think that's all. I think that's all good. And so I'll finish by saying I think one thing I noticed right away is we organized within the University of Michigan in a way that helps faculty bubble up ideas, right? But it feels like we're bubbling up ideas within a construct that somebody else defined. The Department of Energy says you should do X, and we're very good at that, right? But I think we could be bolder than that, all right? And I'm going to bore you with a very short history of something that happened at the University of Michigan in 1948 called the Michigan Memorial Phoenix Project. At that time, the students of the university came to the administration and they said, you need to do something as a tribute to fallen war vets. We don't want it to be static. No plaque, no memorial, it's got to be a living thing. And after a couple years, the university decided they wanted to lead in the civilian uses of atomic energy. So recognize at this point, most people, nuclear, anything, is just something that happened in a war, right? And what's interesting to me about this is the first fundraiser the university ever did was for the Phoenix Project. Why? Because they felt at the time that if they relied on government funding, they would be constrained in their vision and their ability to do things, right? So you have an example from 1948 that said student activism led, drove the university to go out and raise money so they weren't constrained in their vision by other people to do things that no one else was doing at the time. So I love some of the things we're doing, but I think we need to up our attitude.
Great. Okay, so moving down the line here, if we were thinking about that track, Kathy, how would you characterize where those different pieces are? Community, the research enterprise, students?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, maybe I can describe it from my perspective in architecture and urban planning, because that's the students that I know best.
Yeah.
But I know that our students are really eager to be engaged in the research that faculty are doing, and especially when it has to do with research that takes place in communities. A lot of the work is with planning, with transportation planning, sustainable urban development. The students are incredibly passionate about that, and I think that the questions that they ask and the concerns that they come with are ones that we also we're learning from, and some of the questions they ask make us ask different questions, and so I think there is a necessary kind of feedback loop between questions and concerns that the students bring up and the way that researchers and faculty are setting their priorities. And this is an initiative that we're just launching at the College of Architecture and Urban Planning that you mentioned, which is Climate Futures. Jen Maigret, who's here, I'm gonna call her out. She's leading this, and this is going to be actually really aimed at connecting research and pedagogy together within the college, because sometimes it still exists apart. The students who might be involved in research or in certain projects are getting the benefit, but it may not be across the whole board of students. So how do we really bring the insights and research that I think we could do better in bringing insights and research and methodologies more ubiquitously in what we're teaching?
Great. Shelie, do you want to weigh in? And then I have a different set of questions for this side of the panel. But
Sure
last
thing.
word
Yeah.
on this.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's always going to be things that we absolutely can and should learn from our students and learn from societal conversations. I think there's a piece that we can really add to the conversation that I think that we do need to be continuing to push, and that is one of the things that Peck mentioned, which is the systems view. And I think it is, when we talk about really complex issues like sustainability, it's easy to have a very narrow focus, and I always call it, sustainability whack-a-mole, where you solve one problem only to pop up a whole bunch of other problems. And I think it's really easy to simplify, to a specific thing that we can immediately see without thinking about the entire supply chain, without really thinking about the entire consequences of a policy or a product. And so when we start thinking about, yes, everything happens in place, if we're trying to connect things like decarbonization efforts for wind and solar, we have to understand the entire supply chain and its impact on the global south. And I don't think that's, an immediate thing that people start thinking about. And I think that is one of the places that we can use our research to try to contribute to the conversation and drive it forward.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I think 20 years ago, justice wasn't a part of the climate conversation. It entered. But now supply chain is a part of the conversation, and thinking about the impact of decarbonization on the global south, right? So thank you so much, everyone on this side. We're going to come back. But,
Shalanda, I'm going to interrupt really quickly. Yeah. I bet there are a bunch of great questions percolating in your minds in the audience. Just to make it clear, the slido.com URL and that number is how you get to submit questions that we'll ask to this group when we wrap up. So I just want to make sure that you folks knew that you could start sending those great questions our way.
Great. I think I saw some people registering that as well. Thanks, Maggie. So I want to shift gears a little bit to this idea of collaboration. Skip, I know you have done a lot of work, starting with Bold Challenges, to think about the interdisciplinary question. And this is, again, a cross-section of many schools and colleges just in this room. In your experience, what has been really effective in facilitating that sort of interdisciplinary collaboration, and how can that be imported into the decarbonization conversation?
Yeah, if I gave a Twitter-length answer, and for those of you who are new, that's what X was. It's starting with the perspective of the other, starting with the perspective of the people you're thinking about approaching, right? Whether it's for engagement or community, and why might they be in a room with you? What are the types of things that they might want? And then can you find the intersection between what you hear from them and what you happen to have? So I was in the federal government for 4 years. I was assistant director of NSF. So I kind of saw the incoming. And when you're assistant director of NSF, you see this story two ways. You see that all the things that universities are pitching you. And then I don't know what your job was, but part of my job was any member of Congress or any person in the White House could call you at any time, and you had to be ready to defend anything that you had funded or that somebody funded 20 years ago in your office. And you had to answer the question. And so when you think about collaborations, right, the federal government is one example. When you think about collaborations with a partner, because the collaborations we have internally really, really important. But where we get scale, where we get impact, is working with the outside and understanding what the other person or group needs. And just to keep on the federal government, the one thing I ask people to think about is, at NSF, our average grant in engineering, average size of a grant is $130,000. And so a question I would ask you is that a large amount or a small amount?
Depends.
Okay. So at the time that I was there, median household income in the United States of America was about $65,000. So what might seem like a not so big grant of $130,000 is actually the entire year's earnings of 2 American households, where the typical American household has multiple people working in it. So as we think about our own collaboration, as we think about our own partnerships and the impact of what we do, I think I had to as part of my job, you probably did too. The scholarship's great, the discovery is great, the vibe is awesome. But if you want to have impact and scale, starting from the perspective of the real people who are going to be affected by what we do, or, sorry to say this, who are not going to be affected because we are inefficient, right? Because our silos are convenient and we miss opportunities to reach out. So, I mean, my ending kind of Twitter length is when you see what we're doing as a form of service and collaboration is in the form of that, that's where you get impact, that's where you get scale. And I think that's where we've had real successes in the year, being more intentional about that.
Yeah, and just to kind of double click on a couple things, I know that you also have personally spearheaded and led initiatives in the office that you now lead. Can you speak to kind of some specific examples of things that you've set up that you're like, yes, that was impactful, or things that you set up and you're like, oh, that was kind of lukewarm?
Well, again, I'll tell the simple version of a story. So I had 39 and a half hours between my last minute of government service and being in a classroom here. So it was a good break. And I feel like OVPR called within the next hour. So they asked me to come in and take over bold challenges, and we reinvented it a lot. But one of the tricks with bold challenges is, sorry to say it's a trick, it's how do you inspire faculty to do new things and work together, and then how do you signal things that the outside world is interested in and tell the story simultaneously, right? So we would choose these themes, and themes are like adapting to changing environments and creating sustainable energy innovations. And you could ask a question, did this work? And my understanding is that the My Hydrogen people, you guys, is this true? You guys met at a Bold Challenges event? That's the lore. I don't know if it's true.
It's a partially true story.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's partially good enough. So like that, I think. Yeah. So if it's all right, sorry, that's Laura. So bringing people together is really great. Like what hasn't worked, it's really So I'm not like. I wanted 1,000 people to run through the doors. Like we want to work together on stuff like this. And it's really hard. Like, there's a lot of great things going on here. Sorry, I'm just going to be overly blunt. Our incentive system rewards kind of individual effort.
Yep.
Not so good at team things. Not so good at like cross-school things. Good news. You guys are amazing, and people are working on this. We talk about this. I'm on the executive officer. We're talking about this a lot. It is a known issue, and this university, particularly President Ono, wants to figure out how to make the vision real and how to improve our impact. And we can't have that conversation and not have this one.
Yep.
So sorry.
No, I love it. Thank you so much for being explicit, and I love bluntness. So Peck, I'm going to turn to you on the idea of collaboration, but flipping the sort of vision outward to communities. So I know at SEAS, there's the Detroit Clinic on sustainability and climate action. There's Tishman. I mean, there's so many things happening at SEAS, obviously Center for Sustainable Systems. How do you all think about community collaboration in the work? And how important are those relationships to you all, in terms of getting some of your work done? And I'm assuming that was a little bit of a softball, so I want to be a little bit more specific. What advice would you give others who are not yet doing that, if indeed you do feel that that's the right approach?
Well, I definitely feel like it's the right approach, and I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at it in SEAS, because we have a lot of very good scholars in the traditional sense. And what I think is happening in SEAS and across this campus is that we're starting to focus more, not again as a replacement for the traditional work, but as something additional to have more impact in society. And we're doing it all for different reasons. I mentioned the sort of like universities better do it or else before, but I think also if you look across our campus, students, faculty, staff, alums, probably one thing we all want is to tackle climate change and have a more sustainable and just world down the pike. And so even if we don't know how to do that because we're doing something else in our scholarship, I think everyone's open to listening and perhaps collaborating. One of the things I think that is really a good sign is that we are already doing it. So this is kind of a feel-good kind of list, but we're, as a campus, starting to have unprecedented real-world impact. We've always had some, but it's all about becoming unprecedented, solving a major crisis or two or three for society. And the reason we're doing it, working with businesses, working with NGOs, working with community, working with citizens, is because that's how we can scale the size of our impact. A university can only do so much in the traditional, let's just write a lot of papers and get a lot of citations. If we really want to have impact, we got to scale it up. And then we also have to work with other universities so they do it too. But look what we're doing already. University of Michigan had 5 people, including this illustrious new faculty member right next to me, working at the heart of the Biden administration to make the single most impressive climate action initiative work and get going in our country. There's nothing comes close to what the Biden administration did. We had 5 people helping to make that happen in Washington. And maybe more I don't know about, but there are at least 5 in C's. We've had multiple U of M community members, faculty, staff, students, and alums who are right at the heart. I'm looking at Lisa Clark, who led this to create the state of Michigan's climate action plan. And we had, similarly, students and faculty and alums right at the heart of creating Ann Arbor's very audacious climate action plan. Think of Missy Stultz, one of our alums, but there were many others involved in that effort. You brought up Detroit. Multiple people, alums, faculty in Detroit who created the City of Detroit Sustainability Action Plan, Climate Action Plan, and now we have the clinic working, a C's clinic, led by Tony Reams, Professor Tony Reams, implementing it all with a lot of faculty and students. We're talking to development banks and colleagues in countries around the world, and I'm not just talking about C's here, I'm talking across campus, about doing the same thing at the scale of the globe. So we're really laying, I guess, the table to do an amazing amount of work. And right at the heart of this, I always like to remember where we get our biggest impact, it's our students. We're all educating these students who are all going out there, this huge, 600,000 or 700,000 strong alumni base. Many of the sustainability leaders, climate action leaders of all different stripes are out there, are ours, saying go blue when you walk by them with your Michigan hat. And then lots of individual faculty doing research and engagement with businesses and NGOs and governments. We are already getting to the point where we're doing more than any other university in this space. And my dream, and the reason I'm so excited to have Shalanda here is, and all of you, is that we can do so much more if we really get going on this. Remember, it's about traditional scholarship, but it's about even more if we do it right.
Yeah. So thank you, Peck, for that really inspirational framing. I want to ask the social impact question to this side because I think that's been addressed a little bit here, and then we'll do a final round, rapid round, before we get into the audience Q&A. So Todd, I was elbow deep in hydrogen work when I was at DOE. A lot of communities had big questions about its potential for harm, but also questions just about the technology. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think about social impact and justice when designing research and raising research questions, particularly in the hydrogen space. And if you don't have any examples from hydrogen, I know you're also in the nuclear space.
Yeah, and I actually think the answer would be the same, right? They're big, potentially important technologies in the transition that people have a concern, right?
Yep.
And so I think there's a couple of things. One, I think you have to be out and in community, right? So if you look at the details of the hydrogen hubs, it's primarily focused at industry, but one of the roles we're taking on is supporting the community benefits implementation in the state, right? And that's, you need to be there, you need to be sort of an impartial person, right, organization that people in the community can talk to, right, who have questions about because the people implementing the hydrogen hub are big companies, right? They have commercial goals. So I think being very visible is important. I would say that in the history of nuclear engineering, one of our big failures was to not be visible. It was the government decided we're going to do it, and we'll talk to you about it later, right? And I just don't think you can repeat that problem. The second thing is I think it should change the way we teach, right? So when I talk to our students, right, and typically we talk about a technology deployment, we might say, well, let's engage the communities once we've designed this thing, right? And then we'll convince them why it's good, right? But in reality, we ought to be engaging with members of the community the minute you start thinking about designing it, so you don't insert some fatal flaw that's going to make it hard to implement later. And then on the back end, right, I think you can't assume that just because you've deployed the technology that your relationship with the community will be good forever, right? So I try to convince engineers by making them think like engineers. Like, engineers care about a pump, right? And so they'll measure the vibration and the lube oil pressure and all this stuff to make sure they understand whether the pump's going to fail. But they don't think that after they've deployed their technology, they ought to have an ongoing conversation with your community. That's just data. You need to understand that, because even if they like your thing on day one, if they don't like it on day 20, it can turn around and you're not successful.
Where were you for the last 3.5 years during my work at DOE? I mean, you got it down.
I was preparing the University of Michigan so that when you showed up, we would launch the rocket.
I love it. Thank you so much. I want to skip all the way down to you, Shelie, because you are working on systems level things, right? Like food, you know, many issues at the nexus of so many different types of systems. How do you think about social impact, but also justice kind of at the outset of designing new programs, strategies, research projects?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that I think there's hopefully a move to understanding equity and justice more as just something that we need and must do because it's a moral thing to do, but actually part of the, like, it is insufficient not to. We're not going to get to decarbonization unless we consider equity and justice. And I think if we are just focusing efforts on deploying technologies to dense and wealthy and often majority white communities, that's not enough to actually hit the goals. And I think that is a realization that some people are starting to get at, but the idea of, if we're talking about sustainable mobility and transportation systems, and we're not really thinking about rural communities where, yes, it's only 1/5 of the population, but it's 1/3 of the transportation miles, and public transportation models, as they have been deployed, do not work in these communities, we're not going to get to the reductions we need. If we're talking about putting in electric vehicles in communities that have aging infrastructure that can't support the chargers, or don't actually have, you know, single family homes as their primary models, you know, what does that actually look like? And so taking those kinds of considerations and not just starting with the easy things to design and deploy for, but starting for all communities and as a holistic system, I think is really essential, you know, and starting with that aspect of how do we serve all communities, not just the ones that are the easy ones to implement in first.
I love that. I mean, in some ways, the pandemic was sort of an early run, right, at thinking about really blunt instruments and tools that we could deploy, but that those tools were not right-sized for, you know, based on the inequities that we have across our society. Think about the, you know, work from home kind of thing. Yeah, just go home. Well, not everyone can be home, right? So thank you for that answer. I want to end with you, Kathy, in terms of how do you think about these social dimensions and justice questions as you're thinking about research, as you're working with faculty who are in the decarbonization space?
Yeah. Definitely. First of all, there's a few things that I love about this panel so far. I love that I'm sitting at a panel where systems thinking has been brought up several times, because I also am a systems thinker, and try to bring that perspective, all the kind of nested systems and scales, to both the research that I do, but also the teaching, where students are not thinking of the built environment or building as a thing, but as a system that operates through time, whose materials come from different countries. We talked about supply chains, and has multiple ways that it can produce conditions of disadvantage and injustice along the way to becoming a building. I think that in terms of thinking about communities, we definitely need to move quickly in decarbonization, but at the same time, I think that we risk moving so quickly. We risk causing potential harm and injustice. And communities, there's communities who are historically disadvantaged, who are also the ones suffering most from the impacts of climate change. And so it's not just trying to find solutions and pathways toward decarbonization. It's doing so in a context of an already changed and changing climate, which is causing much different dynamics and very unstable dynamics, and also working, and has been sort of said before, that the communities who are most disadvantaged are the ones who can afford the least new technologies, the retooling to retrofit, let's say, buildings toward decarbonization, and are also the ones, historically, at risk of displacement for kind of new infrastructural projects. And so I think what's already been said is to be there at the table with communities right away, as early as possible. The built environment is inherently place-based, so that is something that is very important. And I also think that at Michigan we have an opportunity to really bring the strength we have in the fields that have experience with working with communities. So we have incredible School of Social Work, Poverty Solutions, Public Health, Public Policy, and the Center for Social Solutions around labor and equity. And I think that as we start to develop teams and complex teams, I think bringing faculty with expertise to the table in those areas right from the beginning, I think is very important. And then I'll just kind of end. I also think that one of the great assets of the University of Michigan are the arts and humanities, anthropology, learning from communities, which is what some of the humanistic social sciences and anthropologists have expertise in, learning from indigenous communities that can teach us so much about living with our planet. And then also being able to tell stories to envision the future, because I think decarbonization is not only a technological problem, it's a problem of imagination. And we also need that imagination to be part of what is this future? What does it look like? What is it like to be in it? We need the storytellers to be part of our teams, to be part of our work as we try to develop complex research projects towards the future.
Wow. So You answered the last question as well that I was hoping to ask. I'm gonna get the hook because we want to make sure there are at least a couple questions from the audience on the floor. But it really is about the secret sauce. Like, what is it that will propel Michigan forward in terms of leading the nation on the transition, right, and on decarbonization? And so the question, and again, 15 seconds each maybe, really is what is the secret sauce? So we have Duke in this space, the Nicholas Institute, we've got ASU, long-standing sustainability partner, Stanford, New School, the Door School, Columbia, a climate school. I mean, there's Harvard, Salina Institute, like so many different players, peer institutions who are in the space, but Michigan is different, right? So this is my selfish question to end on. What's our secret sauce? How do we win the race? Shelie, we can start with you and then move down to Todd. Or Todd's already nodding. So do you have a 15-second?
I've already prepared the T-shirt I'm going to wear in the elevator. So
Okay,
it's
great. The pitch.
Embrace the vision of 2034 with the attitude of the Michigan Memorial Phoenix Project to become leaders and best, and take the arts initiative seriously because it's a great way to connect and tell stories.
Great. Any other words, Kathy? 15 seconds or less?
I think I think the secret sauce is right here. I think what we have is in many ways we have most of what we need right here, and I think that kind of embracing that and finding ways to really work together.
Awesome. That's my job, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Shelie.
So I just think we're so incredibly Midwestern. And I mean that in the best possible way, in the fact that there's not that many huge egos here. There's people who are really just nice, hardworking people who want to work together. And I feel like that's part of the Michigan difference.
Awesome. Peck?
I didn't know she liked me. No.
You're not from the Midwest. No.
I am from the Midwest. I was born in Iowa. And, I'm a climate scientist too. And so what I really want to end on is, the climate change is accelerating. What's accelerating faster are climate impacts around the world and the United States. We have solutions. Right now, you look at what the U.S. is doing. We're catching up with China and Europe in terms of mitigation. But don't forget, we also have to be thinking about adaptation and building resilience to substantial climate change we won't be able to forestall. We're the biggest university with this incredibly broad set of expertise, but also deep expertise. And that's why when people bring up Stanford and Columbia, I used to work at Columbia, those are little schools. And they have some really great scholars, and it's really great what they're doing, but they're nothing like the University of Michigan. And I think you're right. There are no tall poppies here, as they say in Australia. But that we do have a little bit of institutional arrogance, and I think we should own it, and let's show everybody we can have a bigger impact than any other university in the world.
Awesome. Skip, last word.
I think that our secret sauce is the combination of our size and our public mission. So the combinatorics just work in our favor. We have so many different types of expertise that when the world changes or the problem presents itself a different way, we have all kinds of ways to bring people together and see it differently. We have to find ways to turn our size from a liability to an asset more often, but it's a thing we're doing. But I'd say it's the intersection of that and our public mission. Our public mission centers us, our public mission grounds us, and when things get difficult and we're trying to figure out what to do, the service orientation of this university, when combined with our size, I think that is the thing that sets us apart.
Love it. All right. Do we have time for any questions from the floor? And I just want to give this amazing panel a round of applause.
You all answered my call. Thank you. Just so you know, we're going to capture all these questions, so they're not going to get lost. You'll see them even though we can't answer all of them today. Most upvoted question is, how do we balance the university's perceived role as impartial actors with the desire to drive action on issues that rightly or wrongly are seen as partisan? Shalanda, divvy that one up.
Oh, wait. I don't have to answer that one. Okay, great. Peck, you ended with the climate scientist piece, right? how do you answer that question around climate change being a partisan issue and moving on that?
Yeah, I think, what it really highlights, it is a partisan issue, but I think it just highlights that we need to connect at the level of citizens and community and business and, with real people. And we need to build relationships with real people. And I know there are a number of people in the room who are just nation leaders in doing that. And we have other colleagues across campus. So think of it as part of the challenge, that in the end, we want to depoliticize it.
Yeah.
But I've done this, through my career, worked with very conservative folks. I used to live in Arizona and worked a lot with ranchers and farmers there. And they're as conservative as anybody. But I'll tell you, they know that climate is changing and that it is hurting their lives and livelihoods and that they want to do something about it. 70-odd% of Americans now recognize that it's real, that we are causing it, and that corporations, especially, but also government, should do something about it.
Great. Awesome. I think we can keep them coming.
Okay,
I'll
we'll
parcel
keep
them out.
Let's stick on this one. What changes need to be made to ensure our engagement with folks off campus isn't extractive?
Ooh. Shelie, I'm going to put you on the hot spot. Well, actually, Todd, maybe you, because I gave you a pass there, Shelie.
Well, can
I
we
want
do
to
that?
hear what Shalanda
I
says to that one,
Shelley.
too.
No.
So I'd say it's involve them in the work, right? Don't treat it like they're somebody you just engage for a short period of time
Yep.
for our own benefit, right? And I think we need to be thoughtful about the way we do that. So an idea I'm obsessed with, right? My colleague Aditi Verma, who works with me, wrote this paper where, when we work with communities, a lot of times faculty will get grant. Federal government says you have 3 years to accomplish this. So you quickly run in and try to partner with somebody, and then you quickly abandon them, right? But I do think, why not set up a structure which looks a little bit like a DOE user facility? It's permanent, right? With staff,
Yep.
so that faculty come, right? So I just think we need to be more thoughtful about how the engagements are ongoing, right? And not short-term.
Yeah, so thinking about places within the university that can be landing places for communities, but that sort of facilitate and maintain those ongoing relationships.
And just like a user, we may pay for a portion of their time.
Yep.
Right. So they're a permanent part of the structure.
Great. Shelie, do you have ideas about that? Because you do a lot of work also in community.
So I would not say that I would be as far as, there are plenty of people who do a lot bigger and broader and great work in communities, more than I do. I guess I would just say it goes down to partially some incentives and how we think about, what we promote and what we expect out of faculty and their work. And I think it goes beyond just the research and the research outputs and broadening what is counted and what is seen as part of a faculty portfolio. And I think it's a much broader conversation about how do we reward continual engagement in communities and not just, oh, you had a grant and we'll reward you for the grant, but then as soon as that grant is over, we're not rewarding you for the relationship at all and what the fruits of that relationship are.
And I also think, having outputs for that community, right? So there's a way in which we as scholars can come in and study an issue, write our own papers, but we have no policy documents. We have no other things that kind of move the needle for the people who are living some of those injustices and experiences. Let's keep moving. We got a couple other voices we want to bring in.
How do those on the panel feel that current funding sources are positively or negatively driving the direction of decarbonization research and collaboration?
Former NSF co-director, would you like to this?
I won't give the valenced answer first, but federal government funding is changing. And again, the Twitter length vision is ARPA, okay? So for many years, basic research has been funded primarily through NSF, through NIH, and in parts of DOE and DOD. There is now a bipartisan fascination with the ARPA model. So you have DARPA, you have ARPA-H, you have ARPA-E, you have an ARPA-I, right? What is ARPA? It's more outcome-based. It's outcome based, and part of that has to do with I think growing congressional impatience with universities, right? And so I think, like, coming back to the last answer, there's a way to have your cake and eat it too in this environment, which is, if you want to think about how not to be extractive and how to get funding, like, my advice is take a deep breath and ask yourself, why am I doing this work? And I think in the past, when NSF funding and NIH funding was more general, you could say, well, I'm doing it to get grants and publications. But I think that philanthropists and federal agencies, in a way, have caught on to that. And, like, part of the DARPA drive is, can you do both at the same time? Can you create an outcome of meaning while you do the scholarship, right? And so the ARPA move may seem like it's it's going towards applied research, but at the end of the day, I think if you're doing meaningful research and you can talk about it with respect to outcomes, with respect to workforce, with respect to real things that happen to real people, you can be competitive in that world and less extractive at the same time.
Awesome. So unfortunately, we have reached the end of this incredible panel. I just want to give, again, the panelists another round of applause. Incredible. And as Jennifer said, maybe this is just the first gathering of this type, the first annual, so that we can get together more frequently and actually revisit our values in the space. So thank you so much.
And I just have a little bit of instruction and closing comments for you all as well. Again, just thank you so much to this panel. It was fabulous.